Polling from the end of the 1930s into the 1940s tells a clear story of American opinion on the war in Europe. According to a Gallup poll taken in 1939, 84% of Americans opposed sending the Army or Navy to fight abroad against the German nation. Even in 1940, polling showed that Americans favored peace with Hitler, even if it meant allowing the Germans to keep the foreign countries they had already annexed. Then, in 1941, the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor drastically changed the American perception of the war, with 97% of Americans approving the declaration of war against Japan. Yet, when the war came to its end in 1945, there was a sudden shift in focus regarding the primary American enemy, Japan. The driving force that actually brought America into the conflict received relatively little consequence for the atrocities committed in Nanking or on the Pacific battlefield, while Germany was subjected to multinational televised trials and numerous executions. Why were Japan and Germany treated so differently after the war? In Doris Bergen's War and Genocide, she details the Nazi regime's cold, state-sponsored bureaucracy that was used to facilitate mass murder. The United States and its allies responded with the Nuremberg trials, which saw 24 high-ranking Nazis indicted, resulting in 12 death sentences and subsequent trials having 1,600 people prosecuted. Bergen uses the metaphor of dry timber to describe the pre-existing prejudices that are necessary for a genocide to occur. The Nuremberg trials focused on punishing this quote-unquote spark. Because Germany was a modern Western nation, the Allies had a prerogative to publicly discipline it, to prove that fascism was an aberration. Nuremberg was not simply about justice, it was also about the image of democracy's rule over fascism, and served as an ideological cleanup of the Western liberal society's capability to fall into dictatorship. When pivoting from the Nazi punishment to the Japanese imperialist punishment, it becomes clear that these two groups were held to different levels of culpability. In Iris Chang's book, The Rape of Nanking, she documents a level of visceral, state-sanctioned brutality that often exceeds the hidden and bureaucratic machine of the Nazi regime. Japanese newspapers reported contests between soldiers over who could kill more civilians when they raided Nanking, and the state allowed the rape of potentially 80,000 Chinese women. Yet the Allied powers did not document or publicize the trials to the same extent in Japan. People were sentenced, but individuals like the Japanese Emperor Hirohito was never indicted or even called as a witness. Unit 731, a group of Japanese scientists which performed horrific experiments on live test subjects, were granted total immunity in exchange for their data. Therefore, while the U.S. was executing Nazi leaders, they were actively protecting Japanese perpetrators from the public. Iris Chang makes the claim that the United States sought to maintain Japanese society in order to keep a key ally in the Pacific as the threat of communism grew in the East in the form of Mao Zedong. The United States prioritized a stable, useful ally in the Pacific over justice. The absolutely gruesome nature of the Japanese crimes was a geopolitical inconvenience that the United States chose to silence because Japan was no longer seen as a competitor or an enemy, but rather a primary tool to establish reach in the East. Both of these historical events, being taken into consideration, shows the nature of evil is transactional, and justice between nations is only provided as long as it is deemed useful. The most undeniable proof of this bias lies in the treatment of scientists. At Nuremberg, Nazi doctors were executed for human experimentation. However, the United States granted complete immunity to the butchers of Unit 731, the Japanese Biological Warfare Unit, in exchange for their research information. Research that involved the rape and mutilation of POWs, along with surgeries that cut people open while fully awake and aware. We see this same transactional justice in Operation Paperclip, where Nazi rocket scientists were given jobs at NASA instead of prison sentences, essentially meaning that crimes against humanity are punishable only when the perpetrator was seen as useless to keep alive or more useful to be executed. If a war criminal could provide a competitive advantage, they were no longer a monster. Those facts could be hidden or ignored entirely. This takes us to the conclusion. The Western international justice system is based on using the terminology of war crimes to punish enemies that also pose a threat to Western power. Western societies will punish evil they don't see a use for and recruit evil that it does. The disparity between the treatment of the Nazis and the Japanese imperialists show that international law is often more of a moral veneer for swift justice being dealt out by the victor. As we reflect on both the works of Bergen and Chang, it is relevant to ask, is the law a shield for the innocent, or simply a means for the powerful to propagandize to its own people? If justice is served only when it's convenient to upholding the image or power of a government, it isn't justice. It's a trade. Thank you.